the relationship between digital technology and labor that we are seeing around us evolving in India, but pretty much across the world. Although I would argue that in countries like India, it has certain special connotations that we need to be aware of. So I'm not going to waste too much time, but since my talk is titled, it has a subtitle of continuity and change. These are all well-known facts, but I would still want you to quickly reflect on the fact that this kind of an antagonism between labor and capital, or labor and technology even at times, or owners of technology to be more specific, is not new at all. It has at least been with us since the beginning of the 19th century. And some of you would be aware of the very famous instance of the Luddite movement, where textile workers actively protested and ended up destroying part of the new technology that was coming in, which they feared, and not, I would say incorrectly, would cost some of them their jobs. So this kind of anxiety and resistance to new technology, fearing that it's going to come for our jobs, it's going to cost some of us at least our jobs, is not new, and I would like to also emphasize, not necessarily incorrect. There are always narratives put forward, and again, they are not necessarily incorrect as well. I think it's the perspective and the context that matters. That it's true certain new jobs get created when a new technology and a major, you might say, technological disruption happens. But it is also equally true that a lot of older jobs get lost. And this is precisely what I think is happening at this juncture, where digital technology is taking over pretty much all aspects of production of goods and services in a big way. And gig work or platform work that we have been talking about is only one such instance, and that we see all the time around us. And that's a good enough reason also for us to be more concerned about it. But my sort of purpose here in this really short session is to make you aware, or to kind of reiterate the fact that this is part of a more general process of new technology coming into production, which almost necessarily brings about major disruption and actually job losses as far as labor is concerned. Of course, certain specific classes of labor get affected more, as you would know. Now, I just want to also, there's a way I should be able to, yes, I'll have to see what I'm putting up there. So a couple of things, and I don't want to take you through a lot of numbers, but certain things I feel you should be well aware of when we are discussing the context of digital technology and labor in India. The fact is, and this is important for us, given, I hope I'll be able to explain clearly why this is an important fact to understand the kind of digital transformation and its relationship to labor that's happening all around us, and the kind of stories we were hearing repeatedly in the last session. So India has a current economic structure where even now, as of 2023, we have an agricultural sector that produces only 18% of the total GDP in India, and it takes account or provides employment to nearly half of our working population. As you can see, there is an obvious disjuncture in the dependence of labor on agriculture versus the kind of value that they are able to generate. And it is my position, and I share it with a lot of other economists and other policy watchers in India, that this is the fact that India has a lot of what we call in the language of economics surplus labor available for low productivity work, which is also getting demonstrated by the fact that informal employment, essentially employment without proper rights, without any access to social security and any other kind of rights which we expect in the formal sector, is denied to anywhere between 85 to 90% of our labor force. And the germ of this problem is also, and that's why I start with agriculture, is because agriculture works as this reservoir of labor that's always available to come out and work in any kind of informal employment, both in rural areas as well, very much in urban areas. So this is the context in which we have to see so-called digital employment. There are many problems in properly defining digital employment even, but broadly speaking, this is something we can say, and we have some information on, that the core digital sectors, mostly ICT and allied sectors, produce only 8.5 to 9% of our total GDP and employs at this point, I mean, according to the latest numbers we have, it wouldn't have gone up a lot given a lot of job losses which have happened in that sector, less than 1.5% of the total workforce. If you add the estimated number of gig workers, about 8 million is what we are told, we will still be at less than 3%. So my point here is not to say that gig workers are not important to think about or to be concerned about. I'm just trying to say that most of the gig workers at the lower end of our employment ladder that we have been talking about today and in other venues, it's the tip of the iceberg of this enormous pool of surplus labor that's there in India. And they don't have access to productive employment. And this is something we have to understand to better fight, I would say, for the rights of the gig workers or any, actually, we should be able to extend that fight to other informal workers as well. But this context is very, very important because you cannot think about gig workers as a separate class of workers without realizing their connection to the larger workforce in India. Now, what is at stake in India when we talk about the new will somebody tell me when I have 2 minutes, 5 minutes? Yeah, okay, because I have no way of knowing. So there has been a lot of conversation, especially in English media, on how job losses are coming our way with AI taking over a lot of tasks which are currently performed by reasonably trained, skilled, maybe middle skill workers, many of them Indian in the global market. And a lot of those jobs will be lost. Without getting into the details, there are a lot of finer points here, but without getting into that, I would just like to make this point very clearly. And I have no one less than a major official or a high official of the IMF to support me in what I'm saying. It's very rarely that I agree with somebody from the IMF, but here I do. And the point is, the fear of job losses due to automation through AI is only one of the larger set of concerns for developing economies as a whole, and definitely for a country like India. So Geeta Gopinath, who is the number 2 in the IMF, has recently said this, that since a majority of India's workforce is in labor-intensive agriculture, the impact of AI is going to be lower here. Well, as I said, this is one of those uh, points where I agree with the IMF or the IMF's position, but that doesn't make me very happy. The fact that AI itself is not going to lead to major job losses in India is something that I don't see as a necessarily positive thing. Because again, in the larger context of what we are talking about, that automation is clearly going to come our way. And we are, as Indians, because a lot of our workforce, whether they are working here in India or elsewhere in the international market, doing tasks which can be replaced by AI, they're going to lose their jobs. They're going to lose their jobs. Some of them will be able to retrain for other jobs and get something else. But overall, in a net sense, there is going to be a job loss for many people, and some of them will be Indians. They're not going to be a huge percentage. They cannot be, because they're not anyway a huge percentage or even a significant percentage of the total Indian labor force. They're probably a very high chunk of people you and I know, or people here, who are seated here. We might be knowing many of them, but that doesn't make them a big chunk of the Indian workforce. But the fact that they're going to lose their jobs makes me, 5 minutes, yeah, I'm going to finish, makes me concerned for the precise reason that 10 years, 15 years from now, given the kind of skill addition or skill, the kind of skill, the kind of skills that are being acquired by a lot of middle tier, in terms of education levels, young Indian workers, these were the kind of jobs they would have come into. So I'm not so much concerned about the 1% or less than 1% of the Indian workforce who are going to lose their jobs. I mean, don't take me literally. I'm not that concerned. But in the larger scheme of things, I'm more concerned that the kind of sort of employment, decent employment, that a lot of newly educated, newly skilled young people were hoping for, and they have been, their predecessors, their brothers, elder brothers, sisters, maybe even some of their parents have got in the early or mid-90s or early 2000s. These people cannot expect those jobs to be there for them 5 years, 10 years down the line. So that's going to just make our employment problem even more pronounced. In the international discussion on AI and jobs, there is this vision that's often put out, and there is this position also held by some people, that certain other kind of jobs will be created. These are going to be highly skilled jobs, which will get created because AI will be used in interesting new ways. But these are jobs which are, number one, going to be much less in number than the mass IT jobs that we are so used to. And they would require extremely specialized skills. And there, of course, some Indians will qualify for those jobs. But there they they compete with a global workforce of such highly skilled people. So some Indians will clearly make it. But in terms of the size of the Indian workforce, that is really going to be negligible. Some of our IIT or triple IT graduates are vying for those jobs. So they will be fine. In fact, they might expect a better career waiting for them. But that's hardly going to do anything to India's employment problem. 1 minute? 2. Okay. All right. 2 should be enough. So I think it is important for us to understand a lot of jobs that we consider as related to the digital economy. And which are going to possibly increase in numbers in the coming years, which are going to be the lowest tier jobs connected or empowered or facilitated by digital technology, but which are essentially the kind of jobs that we know as gig work or platform work. And my point here is to make you aware that I can see a situation where more and more people get absorbed into this digital economy, but as informal digital labor, simply getting converted from non-digital informal labor to digital informal labor. And therefore, some of the questions, some of the concerns, some of the challenges which the Indian labor movement has been facing for the last 40 years about informal labor is going to now just literally be transported into the digital space. And we cannot expect a separate, distinct, somehow independent solution for digital informality in a country where informality is more the norm than an exception. So that's my simple point. Thank you.